Hello, hello, hello. Stephanie here, Property Game Changers live with you on the Facebook Property Game Changers page. Thank you for joining us. Do grab a coffee and relax. And I know you're going to love this conversation with today's Property Game Changer. Here on Property Game Changers, we're talking about the power of ethical property investing to really change lives. We're debunking the myth that you necessarily need loads of money to get started in property. And we're inspiring each other to believe bigger, to be bolder, and to be game changers for good. And our guest today just blows me away. I really feel I know you so well, Amy, because of her #1 Apple iTunes podcast, the Why podcast. And it tells the uplifting stories of people clarifying their whys and why they do the things that they do. And it's really become hugely popular, and I can totally understand why. And you may know Amy through her previous podcast too, The Property Vault. And that is really a total treasure trove for property investors. And beyond that, Amy is a speaker, a coach, a mentor, and just a fantastic woman. She inspires and empowers her entrepreneurial clients to bring together their purpose and their passion by really clarifying their why with a plan. And Amy has been herself a residential landlord for over 14 years. She has an HMO portfolio in the South, and she's also a SSAS trustee, so we'll touch on that as well. And without any further ado, let me introduce property game changer Amy Rowlinson. Hi, Amy.
Thank you so much for that introduction. I actually don't recognize that person because she sounds amazing.
She is.
And I'm just being, it's funny. I just want to dispel one myth there, or just make sure we're clear on one thing. So I'm iTunes #1 podcaster for the Property Vault. I haven't quite made it yet with Focus on Why. It's my goal. I'm #4 at the moment, so we'll get there, I'm sure.
Yes, I'm sure you will, because that must be a phenomenal amount of downloads to get even to #4. So, and it's a reasonably new podcast as well, Amy.
It's brand new, so it's still got the wrappers on barely. So it was launched on the 30th of April and this year, and I only had the idea for it on the 1st of April. So it was a whirlwind to get it out there. It's been a crazy couple of months of being live, but it's been fantastic. And people, I was so busy focusing on getting it out that I forgot about all the things that were going to come back at me. And I get so many messages. I now have had hours that I spend just replying to everyone's well wishes, or that how they've been inspired, what they're doing, what action they're taking. And it's just been incredible. It's just been phenomenal, actually. Love it.
It doesn't surprise me at all that you're getting those messages. So how I like to start this off now, Amy, is to actually go to that moment. For many people, there's a moment. Sometimes it's a negative moment. Sometimes it's not, but it's the moment where you think, right, I need to make a change. And for some of us, investing in property is the beginning of that change. Was there a moment like that for you?
There certainly was. So what happened was 23rd of June 2016, and I don't know if you recognize that date, but it was quite a big date for people living in the UK because it was the Brexit date. And that date happened to be, I was working for a company, and I could see it happening. I could see them panicking a bit about what was going to change for the company, as were all companies across the country. What was going to happen with the future for these businesses? And what sort of manifested from that point was that they asked me to scale down my days until they knew what was going to happen. And it made me really think about what I was doing, the time I was spending in that particular role, and how it was fitting in with the rest of my family. And what happened essentially was it led to my resignation, because I decided that I needed to focus more time on planning a future for our family. And I already had one property. As I said, I was an accidental landlord for many years, for over 10 years. But I then wanted to invest with purpose. So I decided to, after seeing, very strangely, on the last week of working, I saw an ad in the paper. And that ad was for a seminar, free 2-hour seminar. So I finished work on the Thursday, the 8th of September, went to the seminar on Friday, the 9th of September. The rest is history because I went straight into a 2-year course, but I fast tracked it. I did all of those courses within the first 3 months. So by January 2017, I was ready to invest. I felt I was ready to sort of take the plunge and go out and be a sort of professional property investor for the first time. And that was it. I went out and started investing in HMOs. And because I had the luxury, and I do call it a luxury, of already being a portfolio landlord, I was able to then invest and get good deals through a limited company because I had a track record. So I was coming from a slightly moving start, not from a standing start. But there was, oh my goodness, I learned so much. Every day was a big learning curve for me.
Well, we're going to dive into that a little bit more, but I just want to say, I just want to notice, Amy is an inspiration. We've had a comment here. Amy is an inspiration. Her tireless energy is a gift to us all. And we've also had a comment from Lorraine who says, invest with purpose is good advice. And you certainly did invest with purpose, and you already, as you said, had a standing start. Sorry, you weren't at a standing start. You already had, you'd already made a start on your investing. And then to get you started, how did you finance the first one? I mean, I'm not asking for the details, just the...
No, I'm happy to share that, because what I didn't understand is that we had been paying off our mortgages, so on the properties that we were renting out and on our own property, because that was what we understood, and the we is my husband and I. So where we'd been earning for the past 20 years, we had reduced all of our debt, our mortgage debt, because we just thought debt's not a good thing. We can't have debt over us. What we didn't realize is that we could have leveraged that. We could have been using investment properties to pay off our own mortgages. And that whole cycle of the rich dad, poor dad, of where you use other investments and get other people using their rent to pay down your own debt. So that whole assets and liabilities shift really changed for me. So where I say it was quite an easy start for me, and I sort of rocketed buying properties, you have to remember that I've been spending 20 years previously sort of earning salaries and paying off debt. So we released some equity in our own home, and that's what kickstarted our whole journey.
I think then the message there is that, as you said, the previous 20 years you've been paying off debt, and no matter what people's salary levels are, they could also be doing the same. Some people work for 20 years and then haven't got that, but you can come into it later on, as I've done, and I know that you started being intentional with it in 2016, which is just such a very short time ago, and in that time you've really rocketed. Now, I know a lot of people might have the same idea as you to progress with property, but they'll have a lot of obstacles in their mind. Can you tell us about, did you feel reluctant or hesitant to start, or were you just all in from the get-go?
I knew I had to do it. And now the reason why I wanted to do this was because my husband was working in the city. He was working in a job and had been for a long time. I'd been at home raising the children. I then went back to work part-time because I thought that was a solution to getting him out of the city. That I'd help fast track our whole, I can get him to retire sooner if we can get to a certain point, and we can have this. So I had a sort of a desire, but then when I got some education, I realized that I could fast track that even more. And so my mission was very clear. I set a date. It was 30th of September 2019. He was going to be retiring. Now, I knew that I had a lot against me because I was going against the flow, and a lot of my areas of expertise. I had to learn so many things. I wasn't financially literate for a start. So there was a lot to take on board, and I was not great at things. Hands up. It took a lot of willpower and effort. What got me through was knowing that I had this clear goal, and also I documented the whole process. Every single day I wrote a diary just to chivvy myself. I was my own cheerleader to really get me through. And I also started a very small mastermind with other ladies that I knew were on similar journeys. And again, every month we sort of held ourselves accountable for where we were going to go. So those sort of two, network was just incredible. I would go out networking, and that was another thing. Now I didn't stop. when I hit that deadline. And actually I was out by 3 days, because it was the 3rd of October that he finally sort of hung up his boots, so to say, and left the city. But
Yeah.
I have carried on journaling because of
Mm.
how much that has really benefited me ever since. And I'm on day 1309.
Wow. Tell us a little bit about journaling, because although you kind of think, well, I know what that means, what does it really mean? What do you write about?
Okay, so I write about what I want to achieve, little goals, big goals, whatever they are, whatever comes by. I write how I feel that day. I write about the wins I've had. I write about my learnings. If I've read a book, I'll write down the key messages from that book, almost like a little mini book review. I also write down inspirational quotes. I write down things I'm grateful for. Now, that all sounds like a lot, but actually it's just about half a page. And here, I'll show you. This is my collection. There you go. That's my
Oh,
journaling. That's
wow.
every day. So
Yeah.
it's just half a page. So
Yeah.
it's not much, but for me, I was talking to somebody earlier actually it was in our mastermind group, and I'm going to share something that I haven't shared with anybody. And in fact, I even forgot it myself. And if I just find the page, bear with me. This was something that I wrote on the 29th of December, 2016. So we're going back quite a while now. However, I wrote, they can see a little spider diagram on here.
Yeah.
And I wrote on that day that I want to share my knowledge of how and help other people to find their why.
Oh, so
And
it's always been there.
it's always been there, but it's only because it's in that sort of unconscious brain that
Yeah.
it obviously popped out on the 1st of April. So I know we're sort of leaping about sort of
Yeah.
timelines here, but I just wanted to take back to that moment that if you document things and you keep a track of what you're doing, it really helps you to focus on what you really want to do. And it's all very personal. Everyone has a very personal why. It's different for everybody. So for me, this was my starting point. This is what I wanted to achieve. And then after that has taken me to different places. So
Mm.
having an understanding of that, and I had no idea about personal development. My goodness, when I walked into those bookshelves on Waterstones, other shops are available obviously, but when I went into that shop, it was like a treasure trove. I was like, how did all this happen around me? I was so
Mm.
focused on bringing up and raising my 2 children that I
Mm.
hadn't realized that this was all going on, this whole world of personal development.
Yeah, and it's so life-changing. I started with intention from a bit more of a standing start than you in 2016 as well. And I'm just blown away by how much of a difference the thinking has made. That the only difference really between just coasting through life and really getting results that, still surprise me is the thinking. What would you say to anybody who's just starting off that journey to sort of intentional purpose for living, of how to get started?
In property specifically, I think that I have an acronym which I use, which is it's called knowledge. So it's all about acquiring as much knowledge, getting as much knowledge, and that doesn't have to be paid for courses. There's so much availability out there. There's so many
Mhm.
resources out there, but it's understanding what options are available and then working out whether that's going to fit in with what you need. So
Mm.
for me, it's working out what you're trying to achieve and then reverse engineering that to
Mm.
today, and then
Mm.
working out what steps are, because anything is possible if you set your mind, but it has to be the right thing for you. A lot of people sort of see, oh, they're doing this strategy, I'm going to go and follow that. It
Mm.
has to be right for you, and you need to sort of put your blinkers on and really focus once you know that that's the right thing. So I would be looking first for knowledge, looking around you, networking. Oh my goodness, there are people out there who have done what you have already done.
Mm.
Why is to try and reinvent the wheel and do it the hard way? No, go and ask them what they've done. People in property are so generous with their time and their knowledge. Absolutely. Hands down, there are people out there who will help you. And it's
Great.
a bizarre, It's great. It's such a wonderful industry to be in. And we've got the fabulous group of the Property Sisters for a start. They've got an amazing YouTube channel. You can go and have a look at the YouTube channel there. They've got lots of different resources. As you said earlier, I've got the Property Vault podcast. I've got specific episodes on there with Dan where we talked about how to get started. Why are you getting started? What are you going to do? What options are available? How are you going to structure your finances? There's so many resources out there. Being organized, so we've got the K, the N, so knowledge, network, organization. You need to be organized. This is a tough job. It's a business. This is not a sort of on the side. I know a lot of people start with property on the side, but it's still to be treated as a business. So being organized, having systems in place, and then work. It's not easy. This is a 3 to 5 year plan to get going, and then it's a long-term strategy if you want to hold property. So that's and leverage your time, leverage sort of what your skill sets. There are other people out there who will do things better than you. E, I say for education. So it's all about maybe doing some formal education or finding someone who's going to help you, because there's knowledge, but then there's education, mentoring, or coaching, or courses, being more specific about what you're doing. And then we've got D. So this is the deals. It's not going to work unless you go out there and find your deals, right? And so that's have you got the time, or are you going to get someone else to help you source them? And if you're going to use a sourcer, they've got to be verified, they've got to be credible, they've got to be registered. And then you've got G. What are your goals? Because it's all about focusing on what it is for you and how you're going to reach them, what your timeline is. And my final one, which unless you don't know, it's all about enthusiasm. It's all about energy. It's all about how you're going to get there and what you're going to do, because there's no point having all of this going if you haven't got the drive to take it through. Now, all of that spells knowledge. And one of my favorite quotes is by Anton Chekhov, and there's no point acquiring knowledge unless you're going to apply it.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. I love that. I haven't heard that one before. Obviously, that's something that you've created. Knowledge, network, organization, work, leverage, education, deals, goals, and enthusiasm. That is a fantastic package. So let's just talk. I just want to touch on a little bit about your HMOs and then move on to some of the other things that you're doing more recently. But can you tell us a little bit about how you manage that? Is it near to where you live, your portfolio, or is it totally outsourced? How did you decide to do it with HMOs?
So initially I thought that I would do it locally, because then I can sort of be as hands-on as possible. But actually that model is not good from a time perspective for me. So I realized that actually the best thing to do is to create a model where I am outsourcing everything. So I have different managing agents for the different areas that I invest in. And that gives me a huge amount of time, because I don't want to be in the business. I want to be working on it. So that's the whole E-Myth concept written by Michael E. Gerber. It's brilliant. So with that, I invested in areas that have good demand for the particular types of properties that I have. I have one student and all the rest are professionals. So I thought I would try out a student property in one area, and then I didn't replicate it because it's not been as good a model as my professional property. So I still kept it, and it's really nice to have a different type of property, but the rest of them are all professionals, and they are led by where there's been demand in those areas. So I have different locations, but they are actually all south. I'm just before lockdown, my husband, who now has the time to work more, is going up a bit further north, and he's looking at a new area to invest in.
Brilliant. Yeah, I think it's really interesting the way that people do these things. And once you've got that, I know also that you are a SSAS trustee. So I did want to touch on that, because so can you tell us a bit about what being a SSAS trustee is, first of all?
Absolutely. So one of the decisions that my husband and I made together was that we would take control of our own pension and take control of our own pension pot. So what we did is we can amalgamated several pensions. I had 2 and he had a few as well. And we put them all together into one pension pot, which we now have as a small self-administered scheme. And what that means is that we can now take control over our own pension, and we can apply it and deploy it into areas that are HMRC approved, of course. And that means that we can invest in other projects, we can do third-party loans, or we could buy commercial property. There's lots of other things that you can do with it. It's actually incredible. But we're still very early in our days of having our own responsibility for a pension. And it is a big responsibility. This is our future pot, that we've been paying into for 25 plus years. But the flexibility and the ability to then be in control of it and not have it sort of outsourced and have someone else administer it, it feels great, because it means that we can then tie it in. And what is also great is it becomes a legacy, because you are now it can be passed down to generations.
Yeah, that's what I love about it. What I really enjoy about having our own business is we then get to decide. Obviously, we've got our own assets for ourselves, but also we can do good works with the money that we make, and it's very important to put that in trust to pass on and so on. And so we're also just investigating the SSAS, because that is certainly a route to go down. So let's talk now about the stuff that I know that really excites you today. And I am an avid listener to your podcast. I listen to them all in different order. So the last one I listened to was with Louise from the Innocence Project.
Oh, yeah.
But my especially favorite episodes are the ones where you bring it all together, because I just love the diligence and care that you obviously take with each one to draw out all the threads and bring them over to us in a way that's really easy to digest. And you can pick up new aha moments with your episodes where you do that. So I wondered if you could share, after all of these episodes with people sharing their lives with you and their whys, the things that you think that really work for people in creating a good life.
I think for a lot of people, it's that moment where they realize that they're moving from this position of existing to living, where they actually have found their own light bulb moments. For me, that is just incredible to see, because I've seen now, I've been in that position. I was living in a life, well, I was existing where days are sort of rolling by, and you get sort of wrapped up in the melee of life, in the sort of the busyness of running a family. And I was happy, don't get me wrong, but it was only when I decided to sort of have more purpose and have a more focus that I realized that there was so much more. I was capable of so much more. And I think there was a time when the children got to a point where they weren't as demanding, so I was able to do that. And that coincided with me sort of taking responsibility for more of the finances and building the portfolio. And now that I am in a position where I have the flexibility, because I have that income to afford me to the time to pursue more of my passions, that's where my sort of my light bulb went off, and the lights in my life where it sort of went off a lot more, because I'm now in so much more control. And that sounds sort of formal, but it's not. It's actually really flexible. And I think that's where I see that in the guests, where they've also had those moments of clarity, of where they realized that life wasn't sustainable the way they were going. And often that's come from a pain point. But where I'm coming from is I don't want people to get to that sort of huge level of pain before they realize that they could actually take more control and have more flexibility in their lives.
And I know that you do coaching, and I'm guessing that that's for people who maybe are at a crossroads. Or can you talk to us a little bit about that?
It often is. People get to a point where they realize that they don't want to be doing what they're doing anymore, and they realize, oh, I don't know what else I could do. So they come to me to sort of help them work through that crossroad journey. And I love seeing that sort of stretching of their capabilities. And it is just incredible to see the results of what people can achieve once they sort of see that dream get a little bit closer. And you can see the sort of excitement and trepidation, because it is, going out of your comfort zone. I have a post-it on my desk, and this is my to-do list, and it's leave my comfort zone. It's a one item thing, and going out of my comfort zone on a daily basis is something that I advocate. So why not, push other people to do that as well? Because looking back at my journals and seeing what those dreams were, what I thought I could achieve, reflecting now and observing now, they were small dreams. And yet that was where I was then. And I'm not going to belittle that. That was me. That was what I thought I could do. And now seeing how far I've come and what I can achieve, I reflect and observe and appreciate that. And so I know that anything is possible if you set your mind to it, but it has to be the right thing. It has to be what's right for you. Don't live other people's dreams, live your own dreams.
So I'm intrigued. I can't imagine there's much pushes you out of your comfort zone now, Amy. So tell us, what sort of things have to be on the list to push you out of your comfort zone?
Well, doing a live like this, being in a situation where you're being asked questions sort of on the cuff. I mean, I record a podcast, but that's recorded. I can edit it, I can change it, I can redo it. This is something that's live. So this is like, what's going to happen? It's always that sort of nervousness around that. But that's great. I'll finish this at the end and think, okay, well, hopefully somebody has taken something away from this session and it will be of benefit to them. And so for me to push myself out, talk about what I'm doing, hopefully that will sort of invoke in someone else's life, inspire someone else to take action, because that is what I know that I'm on this planet to do now, is to help other people create their best possible futures and stretch their capabilities and inspire them. And podcasting and coaching are two mediums that works.
Yeah, the podcasting is so beautiful. It's so much more intimate than video, although it seems like it wouldn't be. And Ree has commented here, Amy, I'm impressed by your talk and it's great learning from you.
Oh, thank you, Ria. It's lovely to hear you on here as well, listening. It's great.
And I just wanted to say that there is one person who's changed something, because I do write down a lot. I write down my goals, and in the last 4 years since I've started doing this, and I've really found that useful. But I don't keep a journal. And listening to you on other people's podcasts as well, and talking to you today has made me think, do you know what? I'm going to start doing that. I think that's something I would really enjoy as well.
It's really a personal thing, and it it can be in whatever form you want it to take. There's no prescribed route of what an ideal journal looks like. Whatever works for you. For me, it's a sort of a scribbling of the day's events, and sometimes I write it in the morning of what I'd like to happen that day. Sometimes I write it in the evening and reflect back on what's happened. So whatever you want it to be, but for me, it's a snapshot of how I feel, what I see, what I hear, what I've done in that moment. And that means I can't modify my memory, because our memories are very good at looking back and making things a whole lot worse than they were, or a whole lot better than they were. Whereas this is exactly how things were and how I felt at that time, which I think is really important to see this journey of growth.
Yeah, absolutely. And tell us a little bit. You've achieved a phenomenal amount in the last 4 years. Yes, we acknowledge that you've done a lot in property, but also with all of the gifts that you've given us with the Property Vault podcast and the coaching that you do, and now the Focus on Why podcast. So, what is next for Amy? What big dreams do you have now?
So the podcast, the Focus on Why podcast, is 100% where a lot of my focus is. 100% of my focus is going right now. As you know, it's listed as podcasts coming every hour of the day at the moment. So I believe that this is actually a people podcast. It's not about me. It's about where people want it to go. It's actually being led a bit about where this is going, because for me, it's my way of helping others, and by helping others and getting the feedback that I'm getting, people are sort of prescribing what they want from it. So I'm being led by others for once, which is, it's not really me, because I love being a planner. I love having defined routes for where I'm going to go with things. So this is a little bit of an unknown territory, and I'm just going to let that go. But what I do know is there are some books coming up. I've got a talk with a publisher tomorrow about some books that I've been meaning to write for a long time. I've been asked to write for a long time, and they are finally going to come into fruition. So that process is starting.
Oh, wow. Books plural as well, I notice.
Yes. Yes.
What are they about, or is that
So,
something you
yeah,
don't want
so
to talk
that's a
about?
conversation I'm going to have with my publisher tomorrow, and I'm very excited because there are lots of ideas, and I've been sort of writing about them. I mean, the journal, there's so much in there that there's definitely content. So there's definitely going to be something around the knowledge acronym that I've got. So there'll be a whole sort of property book there. There's
Yeah.
definitely something along the focus on why that area. I'm a massive fan of habits, so there's going to be something around that as well. And I mean, these are all things that come from my personal perspective, but they have to be a what's in it for the audience, what's in it for the reader, and it has to be that there is a value. So that's where I'm going to be fine-tuning and talking about that with a publisher tomorrow of how that will look for other people.
That's great, and to get a publishing deal or to be in discussions with the publisher is phenomenal. And I know that the habits, certainly you could talk on very well, because we were mentioning just before we went live that you're on day 1300 and something on the journal.
And 9, yeah, so 1309, yeah. And you know, it's just become I can't miss a day now. You know, it has to I just have to keep going because of the value I get from it. And it's just so sort of life reaffirming. I think that just to see the track, and if I go off track, it's visible because it's there, it's in black and white. And having the book reviews as well, I flick through that, and it's when you say you enjoy listening to my reflections and observations, thank you. I love that, because I get a huge amount of feedback on the other ones, but I don't often get a huge amount of feedback on the reflections episodes. So it's nice to hear that you find value in those. And often those were linked to learnings that I've had or reflections that I reminded me of things that I've learned in the past. And I flick through my journal and find that, and I bring it back into sort of present day. So it means a lot to me, those episodes.
And I heard the episode where you on Anna Parker Naples Get Visible podcast interviewed her, but have you had somebody interview you on your podcast?
I did. So Atuksha Poonwasi literally reached out when I said that I was going to do this podcast. She said to me, "How are you going to do your first episode?" And I said, "Well, I've got it all planned. I've got it all written. I'm a planner, as you know." And so she said, "Well, actually, would you like someone else to interview you?" And I thought about it, and I went back to her and I said, "Actually, well, why not? You know, that makes sense." And so that was just, again, as I said, this podcast is not just about me, it's about other people. And if other people want to have a part in that, then I'm all on board with it.
Great. Well, I need to go back because I thought I had looked at every episode. I hadn't listened to them all, but I missed that one. So I'm going to go back and dive in there, because whenever I speak to you or hear you talking on other people, I always feel I want to know more. So that'll be a good place for me to start.
Well, actually, it's interesting you said that you heard at me interview Anna. Did you hear her interview me on her podcast recently?
Oh, no, I didn't.
So actually, I'm going to do a pod swap. I'm going to ask her for that copy, because that was recently. That was only last Monday it came out, episode 97, I think it was. So it was in her run up to 100 episodes. And she interviews me, and it's brilliant because she asks me some really good questions about what I'm doing, why I'm doing it. And in a snapshot, that's a great one. So I might ask her if I can pull that and put it into my sort of folder so that it's there for people to hear as well.
Brilliant. Well, as we come to a close today, Amy, is there anything that you would like to just leave people with?
I think who you are, what you do, and what you have is all within your control. And what you want to have determines who you become and what you do. So what are you doing? Are you living or are you existing? Are you in control? Do you have a purpose? Do you have a plan? Are you focused on your why?
Brilliant. Thank you so much for joining us. And thank you also for joining us today. It's been great to have you with us. It's always a pleasure for me to get to have these conversations. And I look forward to joining you again soon. So it's bye for now from Anna. Sorry. Bye for now from Amy.
It's bye from me. Yes, indeed. Bye from Anna too.
And bye from me as well.